Good morning. Hello, everybody. Good to see you. If you'd like to stand and sing with us, that'd be great. Welcome to Brown Line Church. Good to be with you.
There's a world at war, caught in suffering, silent casualties. Oh, God, grant us peace. In these sleepless nights, I can hardly breathe. Despite brutality, I hope that we'll be free. I hope that we'll be free. Let the light in, keep it shining. Let it break into the darkness. All the love dares us to see, we'll all be free. Let the light in, keep it shining. Let it break into the darkness. All the love dares us to see, we'll all be free. In these desperate times, love will hold us here. Love will join our hands, teach us to have no fear. So we lay our hate down to wash their feet. When we see our brother, oh, we'll all be free. Yes, we'll all be free. Let the light in, keep it shining. Let it break into the darkness. All the love dares us to see, we'll all be free. Let the light in, keep it shining. Let it break into the darkness. All the love dares us to see, we'll all be free. We'll be free, free. We'll all be free. We'll be free, free. We'll all be free. We'll be free, 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 free. We'll all be free. We'll be free, 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 free. We'll all be free. We are free, free. We'll all be free. We are free, free. We'll all be free. Let the light in, keep it shining. Let it break into the darkness. All the love dares us to see, we'll all be free. Let the light in, keep it shining. Let it break into the darkness. All the love dares us to see, we'll all be free. We'll all be free. We'll all be free.
Just want to say that there will be Hayley will be in the back if you want prayer during this time. There's a lot of loss and death and pain in our country and in Gaza and around the world right now. So it's heavy. It's a heavy week, heavy time, and so use that resource of being able to pray with somebody. It can be really powerful and helpful in times like this, and that's kind of why we're here, is to be together in that and to reflect on that together. So.
There is no one like you, no one like you. Only good things can ever come from you. judgment, righteous and true, and your name is sweeter than the rain that falls upon the face of dry and weary land, and causes us to turn our face again. Your name be praised and be lifted higher. And be lifted higher. And be lifted higher. And be lifted higher. There is no one like you. No one like you. And every morning there are mercies new. It's your kindness that brings us back to you. And your name is stronger than the pain. It's covering the shame of all these weary hands, and causing us to turn our face again. Your name be praised and be lifted higher. And be lifted higher. And be lifted higher. And be lifted higher. Love be lifted higher. Love be lifted higher. Love be lifted higher. Love be lifted higher. Stronger than the pain. It's covering the shame of all these weary hands, and causing us to turn our face again. Your name be praised and be lifted higher. And be lifted higher. And be lifted higher. And be lifted higher. Love 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 be lifted Love be lifted higher. Love be lifted higher. Love be lifted higher. Love be lifted higher.
Thanks for singing that with us. Last night I got to go to a concert, see one of my favorite bands. That's the band that sings this song, Eyes to the Sky, that we've been doing here for a while now. And the band is like three sisters who have been singing together, and it's their 10-year anniversary of writing this song and this first album. And they grew up in the church and talked about how like our we've changed so much since we wrote this song and this album, and our views on things have changed, and they had to change some of the lyrics to their songs from that. They played through the whole first album, but they changed some of the lyrics just so that they felt like they could still sing the songs, and still believe what they were singing. And it made me think of y'all, of Brown Line, and of this, because I don't know, this is a thoughtful church community when it comes to lyrics and singing things that we feel like we can truly, not necessarily always believe, like we have our doubts and our questions, but like singing things that we feel like are true, and making sure that we're thoughtful about that. And so, anyways, thanks for singing songs with us. We'll want you to sing. It was fun. Everybody was singing so loud last night, so I'm not expecting you to meet that Talia Hall level, but thanks for singing with us.
Sun, come down on me now, warm this cold, cold heart of mine. Troubles come and troubles go, may I see light through tired eyes. Up my eyes to the sky, to the sky. I will lift up my eyes to the sky, to the sky. I will lift up my eyes to the sky, to the sky. I will lift up my eyes to the sky, to the sky. Give me grace and give me peace through my pain and suffering. Be a constant fire that draws me higher. Burn up the despair that's been sinking me. 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 I will lift up my eyes to the sky, to the sky. I will lift up my eyes to the sky, to the sky. I will lift up my eyes to the sky, to the sky. I will lift up my eyes to the sky, to the sky. Burn up the despair that's been sinking me. Burn up the despair that's been sinking me. Burn up the despair that's been sinking me.
Beautiful. Nothing is wasted. No, nothing is wasted. Nothing is wasted in the hands of God. No, nothing is wasted. No, nothing is wasted. Nothing is wasted in the hands of God. All things are sacred. Yes, all things are sacred. Yes, all things are sacred in the hands of God. All things are sacred. Yes, all things are sacred. All things are sacred in the hands of God. Our future's creative. Our future's creative. Our future's creative in the hands of God. Our future's creative. Our future's creative. Our future's creative in the hands of God. Nothing is wasted. Nothing is wasted. Nothing is wasted. Nothing is wasted in the hands of God. Nothing is wasted. No, nothing is wasted. Nothing is wasted in the hands of God. No, nothing is wasted in the hands of God. Amen. You may be seated.
Let's give it up for Angela and Teal for starting us off this morning. Good morning, Brown Line Church. My name is Mike Frazier, and to my fellow sports fans, happy first day of the NFL season. When I saw that this morning's message was about faithfulness and beliefs, I couldn't help but reflect on the faithfulness of Bears fans and the belief that this is the year, despite infamous track record of draft picks. So, hey, I'm a believer, so we'll see. Thanks to everybody who made it here in person at the Davis Theater in Chicago, and thanks to everyone joining us online. If you'd like to participate in our chat this morning, you can scan the QR code on the screen, which will lead you to the free app Discord, and you can join in the conversation and or share your predictions on the over-under for today's service. The line right now is at 1 hour and 8 minutes. Our moderator this morning is Ed Wang, so he'll be there to answer any questions or help guide conversation. So feel free to say hello and tell us where you're joining us from. Our hope here at Brown Line is for you to take time out of the fast-paced demands of life to find rest and resonance within God and the community around you. This church was started out in mind for those who feel more comfortable in culturally secular rather than highly religious setting. Brown Line is a church that is both rooted and open, rooted in Christian traditions and open to alternative perspectives. Our mission here is to help you connect with a God of love, to help you pursue values that Jesus lived in efforts to live deeper, fuller lives. So hope everybody can experience that level of connection here today. We do have kids' church this morning, so I'd like to invite the kids to join Miss Amanda and Mr. Warren in the back of the theater. And parents, if you're newer, please, just a reminder that make sure we have your contact information just in case. With that, I would like to welcome up Hayley Larson and our speaker, Carol Montgomery.
Well, good morning, everyone. We are continuing on in our Embracing Beliefs series this morning. So through this, we've been exploring the good and beautiful and sustaining beliefs that keep us going, that inspire us and offer us hope. There are definitely times where it's important to talk through the process of dismantling beliefs that are harmful or no longer helpful. But I think it's just as important to share the good things, what's keeping us going, and what we cling to. These may be more recent developments for you, or they may be beliefs that have formed throughout your whole life. And it's been really fun to get to interview different people from our community as a part of this process. So you're not just hearing from me the whole time, but today we get to hear from Carol, which I'm so excited about. So Carol, could you introduce yourself a little bit?
Well, I am a wife, a mom, a grandma, a retired nurse, retired cross-cultural worker, and an apprentice to Jesus.
I like that introduction. Could you also just briefly share, I think so much of our beliefs and our process of coming to beliefs are shaped by the communities that we are a part of. So could you share a little bit about the faith communities and churches you've been a part of?
Well, I grew up in a fundamentalist, evangelical, very conservative community.
You're good.
Okay. And also we're part of a communal church for a while that was from Mennonite background. And also then most recently we were a part of the Evanston Vineyard, and here we are now.
Yeah. So today we are talking about belief in God's faithfulness, that God is faithful. And I would love if we could start at the very beginning, which is a very good place to start.
Yes, it is.
But could you tell us about how your childhood shaped your faith, your understanding of faithfulness?
Well, obviously I grew up in a faith-filled home. I would say that both my parents were pretty faithful. My father became a follower of Jesus when he was an adult in his 20s. My mom was raised in the faith. My dad was a very, very loving father. I'm very blessed for that. So I don't have trouble thinking about God as being loving. And my mom was a very faithful mom. And so, yeah, that passed on too. My father did die when I was very young. I was the oldest of 4 children, and I was 9. So obviously that affected me quite a bit, and it affected my faith walk too in some really important ways.
Yeah, and when we had talked before, prior to his death, you had talked a little bit about how he left the church that he was a part of.
Yeah, he did for Thank you. He did for a little bit before he died. He and his best friend left our fundamentalist church and started going to a black church in the town we lived in. And I was too young to really understand that. I just accepted whatever my parents did. Mm-hmm. But it was really interesting in later years to think about that, and what a somewhat of a unusual step at that time that was for him.
Yeah. We'll come back definitely to how the loss of your father impacted some of your visions that we're going to talk about, the different key visions in your life. So as we were talking before, for you, God really reveals God's character through these just undeniable experiences of God's presence. Mm-hmm. I was listening to a podcast just yesterday, actually, where they were interviewing Dale Allison, who's a writer and historian and theologian, and he was talking about how he was talking about these like mystical, vision-like experiences that he's had, and he said this statement that really stuck with me. He said, "I had no words for it then. I have no words for it now, other than God." Mm-hmm. And these kind of inexplainable things, whether you would call yourself a person of faith or really across the gamut. I mean, we see things like near-death experiences or powerful experiences at the end of your life, that these moments that just, there are no words, just undeniably God. Yeah. So I'd love to look at some of those specific moments for you. Yeah. Yeah. Is there one that you'd like to start with?
Well, just to preface it with that, I'm a very visual person, and maybe God takes that into consideration when he gives these visions or whatever to some people, is that he knows that's the best way to get to us, is something that's really visual. I'm not a person that sits and mulls over ideas that much, but boy, if I see it, then it's very, very, very real. So let's see, what one would I start with? Well, this wasn't exactly a vision, but I guess I could talk about after the Billy Graham thing at the World's Fair when I was 13. So the World's Fair was in New York City that year, and my mom had just finished a year. This is after my father had died, and my mom had gone to the mission field. She was doing a year in San Jose, Costa Rica, and I was doing a year of 8th grade at the school that she was going to be teaching at after this year of language study. And my 3 younger siblings were with my grandparents up in Wheaton. So she had come back with me. We had gone to New Jersey first to see all the people that we used to live with. That's where I grew up with, by the way. That's where my father died. And the World's Fair was that year, and it was in New York City, and so they wanted to go because Billy Graham had a pavilion that year, and so that was what all the people from church wanted to go to. So we did that, and it was really new technology. It had this wraparound screen, so no matter where you were, it looked like Billy Graham was looking right into your eyes. And at the end, he said, "Do you know that you're saved?" And I saw him looking right into my eyes, and I suddenly thought, well, I thought so, but I don't know. I was like so scared from that moment on. It lasted for 4 months. I was afraid to go to sleep. I didn't know whether I would, I didn't know what the consequences of my not knowing this would be. But I did not, I kept reading the Bible, and at the end of this 4 months, I was reading in John, and I read the verse where Jesus says to the disciples, "Blessed are you," it was right after Thomas had put his fingers in his hands and his hand in his side, and he said, "Blessed are you because you've seen and believed. But blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed." And it was like, I read that verse, and suddenly all my doubt was completely gone. And I knew, even as a 13-year-old, that that was a God thing, because I couldn't have talked myself into that state of belief. And I'd never had a doubt ever since then. I've had moments when I had doubts, lots of moments when I had doubts about myself and about the church and about all kinds of things, but I never had a doubt about God's love for me, or God having drawn me into himself and into his salvation.
Yeah.
So that was probably the first time I had a sort of a numinous experience like that. Yeah.
Yeah, and then another one that you talked about with me was I think it was the sonship course that you were taking.
Yeah, and that was much later. I was probably 50 years old when I was taking that, and they were talking about God the Father, and all the different characteristics and everything, and somehow just in talking, I suddenly heard this thought go through my mind: the Father is the one who abandons. And I was so shocked to hear myself saying that. But I realized there was a part of me that really believed that, because my father had abandoned me. He didn't want to, he didn't do it on purpose, but he was definitely gone, and it was probably the most eventful and consequential and tragic things of my childhood, was losing my father. So when I realized then, because I'd always had no trouble praying to Jesus, but I never prayed to the Father. I never prayed to God. And that just totally changed right then when I realized that that's where it came from, and that it wasn't true. The Father was not the one who abandons. My dad hadn't abandoned me on purpose, and God the Father had never abandoned me in all these years, or my family, my siblings, my mom. So, and that was another one of those where it was a done deal. As soon as the thought hit me, it was just over and done. So.
Yeah. Caitlin Curtis, who's a Indigenous writer, talks about how stories can be cyclical and point to our evolving, and how we tell them over time and who we are over time shifts and evolves. And I think that holding the long view of that experience, that this was something that happened early in your childhood and then found some later wrestling and redemption much later in life. It's really interesting how that got reincorporated.
Yeah.
And
yeah. I think God is really faithful to do that. And we don't know when it's going to happen, but he does it. He's faithful, yeah.
Yeah, I think a lot of times faithfulness looks like what we were singing this morning, that nothing is wasted.
Yeah.
That there can be meaning made out of these experiences.
Yeah.
That's just a beautiful truth to come out of this.
Yeah.
So there was another kind of key vision or set of visions, and you don't need to share specifics, but could you talk a little bit about Sarah?
Yeah, our fourth child, Sarah, was born with severe congenital heart defects, which we did not know until just before her first birthday. We just knew that she was not right. And she did, in fact, die when she was 14 months old. And that ushered in a period of 5 years, really, of intense grief for me. Even if you couldn't see it on the surface, that's what was going on inside. It's like your heart is hemorrhaging. You just feel like you're dying. Or that you are dead. I remember walking down the street one time in the fall and seeing a leaf bean scuttling along on by the wind on the sidewalk and thinking, that's me, God, that's me. But then, just to make that story a little quicker, I'll go to at the end of that 5 years when God really healed me. It was, we were at a vineyard conference with several other people from the vineyard, and Steve Nicholson said at the end in the evening when we had gathered together, he goes, well, I'm tired, I'm going to bed, but I think the rest of you should pray for Stephen and Carol. So I thought, well, that's interesting. So they prayed for us, and a really amazing thing happened during that prayer time, that God just showed me. Maybe I can describe this without falling into tears like I always do. But
You can fall into tears.
it's okay if I do. But anyway, they were praying for us, and all of a sudden I saw myself in a very dark, enclosed box. Like, it could have been a huge cardboard box. It could have been a tomb. But it was completely dark, and I was in there. And then I was in there for a while during this prayer time. And then at a certain point in the prayer time, up on the roof of this space, a trapdoor flew open, and this bright light flooded in. And then I saw 5-year-old Sarah's face peering down into the space and going, Mom, Mom, it's okay, you can be alive. And I was absolutely shocked back into life by that vision that God gave me. I think he knew that Sarah had to come with the tail, to talk to me. And I was healed from that moment on. I miss her still, all these years later, but it's not an oppressive grief, and it never was after that moment. So God was incredibly gracious.
Yeah, that's the word I was going to use. This idea in the podcast that I mentioned earlier, they were talking about how visions or experiences like this of God's presence are often out of the blue. They're not often sought after. Mm-hmm. You're not trying to set up the perfect climate to have the perfect type of experience or encounter, maybe is a word someone would use. But that is grace. Yeah. This surprising gift, and to name it as God's grace, I think is really powerful.
Yeah. There were a lot of others during that whole time when she was sick, and then during those 5 years, God just gave me quite a series of very poignant visions that were all part of that coming to terms with the whole thing in my life of losing a child, and then being healed of that grief, so it could not poison my life anymore. So I won't describe all those different ones, but if you're curious, you can ask me. I'll tell you some other time. So.
Yeah, how, as a whole, how has grief, you had the loss of your dad when you were young, you've had the loss of Sarah. How has grief shaped your understanding of faithfulness?
I think it's shaped my understanding of God's faithfulness because God was there, and especially even as I got older and older and could look back. And, I didn't implode. My family didn't implode. My mom was amazing in spite of her deep grief on losing my father. So I think it really did. If I hadn't had those experiences, those were really lived experiences of God's enormous faithfulness in the midst of a lot of pain and trauma.
Yeah.
So.
And then there's one more key vision that we had talked about that was more recent during an experience of Emmanuel prayer. Could you talk about that one too?
Yeah. Some of you might remember the Sunday that Anna Cruz was leading us in Emmanuel prayer. And so I was just following her leading in the prayer time, and I suddenly heard God say, you know, you just love my creation so much and the beauty of my creation. And I just want you to know that I made it all for you. And I just kind of, all for me? And he said, yeah, all for you. And I knew even as God said that he made it all for everyone else too. But I had never thought of it being made with just me in his mind. And that's what I experienced then. And I was just so overcome with his love and graciousness and desire to gift us with himself and his good things. So yeah, it's a really good one.
Yeah, something Pastor Judy Peterson, I've heard her say many times, is that I'm God's favorite, just like everyone else's.
Yeah, that's it.
And so I love the specificity of that.
Yeah.
And actually, for the image this week that I chose, it was an icon of the parable of the mustard seed, just this beautiful tree with birds in it and deep roots. And I thought of you because of your love of creation and because of this story. And in this parable, Jesus says that the kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed. And he talks about how, though it's the smallest of all the seeds, it has this potential to become this big, beautiful tree with birds that come and perch in its branches. And I think that's such a beautiful image for faithfulness, that either us being faithful or understanding God's faithfulness can feel like a massive undertaking, but it really is just made up of the smallest of moments of staying present and committing to being curious. This all just contributes to more of a vision of the beauty and transformation for the world.
Yeah.
It really does.
Yeah.
I did want to talk about too, as we're talking about stories as evolving and how we evolve over time and everything, you've had these visions that are so vivid, and you've had experiences of God that are so vivid and point you to this characteristic of God as faithful. Can you talk about how more recently you've been able to hold kind of the whole scope of your life when you're thinking of that, or the very real possibilities that may come from your life?
Yeah, I'm at an age, 74 next February, just for make it specific, where I think about my death and the very real possibility of the illness and decay that, believe me, I can already feel starting in my body. So knowing and thinking about faithfulness and God's faithfulness to me and to those that I love all through these years, in spite of suffering that was along the way for different ones. I think about facing death with that understanding of God's faithfulness to me and that I can depend on it. That hesed love, steadfast, loyal love. And one little thing, Sarah was very, very sick, obviously, and took a lot of care. And then 10 years later, we did foster care for a while, and one of the babies that we took care of was very disabled. And it was quite difficult. It was a difficult time. And I remember thinking later, not a lot later, only a little later, that Sarah and Tatiana had taught me more about God's character than any of my healthy children were able to. And it just was, for me, so redemptive to understand that this difficult time was actually a really precious teaching time in my life. And so I remember that, and I remember how true it was. And I think about, my mother died in dementia after lingering for several years in that state, and I could too, myself. And so I think about Tatiana and Sarah and how God used them in my life, and I just think, well, I really want to just accept that and let God bless somebody else with a better understanding of himself through taking care of me if they have to. That's not an easy thought to come to at all, but I do really believe it, and I want to hold on to it.
Yeah.
So
It's vulnerable to believe that.
yeah, it is.
And you've always been someone who feels things very deeply and carries a lot for others. So I'm sure it's interesting whether it's this pride in your own role of taking care of other people to have that be transformed into thinking through how you may need to be taken care of.
Yeah, very much. Yeah, I was always the one that did everything and was dependent on, And I mean, I don't do everything even now, and I can't always be dependent upon anymore. But that will only get more so with time. And it is giving up that idea of being so great. That's pretty important, too. I was thinking about this morning, that Richard Rohr said one time, he asks God every day for a grand humiliation, just to keep his humility in step. And we read that and we went, ooh, every day a grand humiliation.
I don't know if I can handle grand.
Yeah. It's actually been kind of helpful, because when it happens now, I sit there and go, ooh, and I go, oh, wait, that's just my grand humiliation for the day. I can accept that.
I love that. And I love, too, that this vulnerability and humility, just accepting the inevitable, that you're not always going to be strong and able to hold things together, that is a part of faithfulness. It's not you no longer being faithful to what you feel you need to do.
Yeah.
That faithfulness looks different for different people. How we experience God, what we feel driven to do in the world, how we participate in love, all of those different things are different for people.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times we think of the closeness of God as only being, like, quote unquote, on good terms with God.
Yeah.
This confident and settled relationship that's untouchable. But you also have to get really close to God in order to wrestle. Wrestling is very intimate. You get real up close. And I think that the doubts or the moments of realizing I'm not as physically strong as I used to be, or it's harder for me to do certain things, I think that doesn't counteract faithfulness, because it's still showing up. And there's a willingness to be creative of, if I can't do this, then now what can I do? What feels right now?
Yeah.
And that God is with us in that whole process.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, is there any kind of final encouragements that you want to leave us with around this idea of living faithfully or understanding God's faithfulness?
Just how big God is. When Sarah was, after she died and during those years, I read Job again and again, and Psalm 42 again and again. And the thing I came away with was just kind of like Job, wrestling with God and then finally saying, I didn't get it. I'm too small. I didn't understand. You are huge and amazing, and I worship you and I trust you. And that's kind of where I came out too.
Yeah.
And that's where I want to stay. So.
Yeah. Thank you so much for this.
You're welcome.
I'm going to close us with prayer. So if you would get comfortable in your seat, take a moment to close your eyes, or if you want to focus your gaze on a spot in the room to kind of help settle yourself. We'll take a few deep breaths together. God, I thank you for the gift of storytelling. All of the embodied ways of experiencing your presence that we get to see unfold in the past and keep unfolding in the future. I'm grateful for the wide array of ways that we can experience and witness to your presence in the world. We may have no words for it then, we may have no words for it now, but God. Naming the love we see, naming the trajectory of justice, naming the experiences of being surrounded by community. Would your faithfulness, the steadiest of your loving character and action in the world, encourage us to respond in faithful ways? Mustard seed by mustard seed. Showing up in confidence, showing up to wrestle, showing up just plain curious. Seeing you as faithful, not because you are a God who needs an ego boost, but because we can't help but long to increase love and beauty in the world. It is a gift to be faithful, not a burden. A gift and such a grace.
Yes, Lord. Thank you.
Do you take a moment to take a few more deep breaths? God, would you settle us? Would you collect us? Would we experience your love? Amen. Thank you so much, Carol. If we can give her a round of applause for joining me up here. I'm looking around trying to see if Andy is in the room. I don't know where he went. Okay, we'll go a different week. That awkward transition was brought to you by Andy Larson wanting to do an announcement about a volunteer opportunity for people who may be interested. But he will come up here probably next week and give you more details on that, or you can find him after church with a Ollie running around and hopefully not a crying Sadie. But yeah, he's around. So a little bit of housekeeping and announcements here. Next Sunday, September 15th, will be the last of our kind of like Sunday conversations around embracing beliefs. I'll actually be bringing in a friend of mine from seminary. Her name's Carrie, and she's going to talk to us about her work as a local chaplain and how that work has shaped her beliefs in her life. If you are new or newer with us and you're not sure that we have your contact information, please fill out a Connect card. We would love to follow up with you, grab coffee, see how you've heard about Brownline and ended up here. You can do this by using your phone to follow the QR code to a form to fill out online. There's a link in Discord, or you can also, if you want to do it the old-fashioned way, you can. We have paper cards and pens here as well, right next to the bagels and donuts. If you are looking to keep up with what's going on at BLC, please check out our Discord channel during the week. If you've been participating in the chat today, that's been on the Sunday channel, but there's also a general one as well that people will post in throughout the week. We had a really great conversation at our discussion Sunday last week about really leaning into Discord as a place where people feel comfortable and safe enough to ask for things that they really need right now, whether it's some physical item or babysitting or a cooked meal or whatever it may be. And also a space where we can offer up the excess that we do have or skills that we'd be willing to help others out with. So that can all happen on Discord. People also will post invites to different things coming up during the week or interesting podcasts or articles. So that is a great place to stay in touch. And then you can also follow us on social at Brownline Church for updates on Sundays and any events we're having. And then all of our previous messages are available via YouTube or wherever you get for your podcasts. You can just search for Brownline Church. I'll also take a moment to say a big thank you to all of our donors and volunteers. If you get something out of this community, if you believe in the vision of this church, we would be honored if you'd consider giving as well. Our general fund is how we keep the lights on, how we turn the Davis into a church every week, and how Vince and I pay the bills. And then our neighboring fund is how we serve our neighbors and help folks connected to our community in times of financial need. Oh, wait, here he is. Do you want to do it this week? Okay, perfect. Andy Larson, wonder who that guy is. And the crying Sadie, I told you all it was coming. It's like I know them or something.
Thanks, Hayley. One of the greatest things having your wife as a pastor, you can make requests at the dinner table and just be like, hey, can I make an announcement at church? And she could say no, she could say yes. She's great and said yes to this. My name's Andy, for those who don't know. I am an after-school program director at an organization called Madonna Mission. We're a nonprofit in Rogers Park that provides educational support for refugee families and children. When you think of the word refugee, many things might come to mind, but we are working with a very vulnerable population. They're fleeing from war, climate change, religious persecution, famine, you name it, and they can't return home. And so many actually settle in West Ridge, Rogers Park, surrounding neighborhoods in Chicago, and our space welcomes the doors to provide that education for them, whether it's teaching English or providing reading and literacy support. So we are looking for any volunteers or tutors, same thing, tutors who are willing to commit once a week, every other week. Our after-school program meets Monday through Thursday from 4 o'clock to 5:30. So you'd be paired with one student, a kindergartner through 8th grader, and work with them on their English, their reading. And it's just a great time to build a relationship. And so if that's of any interest to you, if you have any availability, I know many of you in this room work, and so I know it's kind of a long shot, but if you are available on a weekday afternoon around, from 4 to 5:30, and interested, just let me know. And the cool thing is Teal's wife is also one of our assistant directors, and so it's cool to have Melody working with us as well. And so there's a little bit of a Brownline vibe over at Madonna Mission, so we can add more of that if you guys are interested. But obviously no pressure, just let me know if you're interested. Thanks. Can you put a link in Discord? Yeah, absolutely. I can put a link in Discord, our website, how to volunteer, all of that good stuff. Thanks.
Thanks, Andy. All right, so with that, we are going to transition to communion. This is how we end our services every week. After communion, there will be opportunity for more prayer with our prayer team if you would like to receive any prayer today, and that will be up in this front corner at the front of the theater. So communion is a shared meal. It's this regular practice of coming together and acknowledging that we are in need of nourishment that we cannot offer ourselves. We find that nourishment in community. We find that nourishment in communion with a God of love, a powerful God whose power is all influencing, all loving, and not all controlling. You take something to eat and something to drink and share them almost like a toast at a meal. And in this, we acknowledge the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus. So if you are in the theater in just a moment, we will invite you to stand on up and we'll pass around some crackers and juice. If you're joining from home, you can feel free to grab whatever's around you, something to eat and something to drink. You can use this time to mingle. We'll put some music on. You can hang out for a bit, maybe say hello to someone you haven't met before, and then we'll come back together at the end to take the elements and to pray. So with that, you can go ahead and stand on up, and we'll get things passed around. All right. Well, if you would come back together and join me in taking communion. On the night he was betrayed, Jesus shared a meal with his community, and he broke bread, gave thanks, and said, "This is my body broken for you. Eat this in remembrance of me." Likewise, he took the cup and said, "This is my blood poured out. Drink of this in remembrance of me." And so, Jesus, this morning we remember that you are a God of grace. You collect us and settle us. You partner with us in holding on to hope when it could be so much easier to slip into cynicism or despair. Thank you for the gift of community, that we do not do this alone. Thank you for the ways that we have been and will continue to be woven together. Our stories, our experiences, the way we witness love and justice and beauty in the world. Beckon us toward hope, toward love and grace, and sustain us with rest and peace along the way. Amen. Thank you so much for being here, and we will see you next week.